Chairman Shiv Nadar, Chancellor Balakrishnan, Vice Chancellor Rupa Ghosh, President Rajiv Swarup, distinguished faculty and staff, proud family members and friends, and of course, the great graduating class of 2018, good afternoon. Chancellor, a special note of thanks for that very warm introduction, and also for inviting me here today to speak after the guy who invented the World Wide Web. I mean, my kids are deeply, deeply skeptical of any slight honor invitation I get, and I have to tell you, they were delighted when they saw the speaking order to know that I had to follow Sir Tim. They were entirely confident that this speaking order would knock me down a peg or two, and in that they were dead right. Sir Tim, it's truly an honor to follow you and to be on the stage with you today. Now, having said that, it's truly a privilege to be here today to mark your convocation. And you may think that I say that because of the bold and daring ambition of this new university, or because of the serious attention that its research and educational achievements have already commanded at more established international institutions like my own, or because of the deep respect and affection that I have for the university's namesake, Shiv Nadar, and his wife, Karen, and the glittering array of successes that Karen and Shiv have enjoyed in so many fields of human endeavor: business, philanthropy, arts and culture, education, and healthcare. And you would be right, but only partially so. The real reason I'm here today is because of Danish, a proud member of the SNU class of 2018. Danish, could you please stand? So there he is. Wait. Danish, still stand, please. You may wonder why I've called him out. It's because Danish was recently accepted into the Masters in Engineering Management program at Johns Hopkins University. I'm hoping he's going to accept that offer of admission. But here's the reason why I'm here. The folks back in Baltimore sent me here today to welcome you personally and to give you this T-shirt from Johns Hopkins. Well, you got to come up here and get it, Danish. Now you gotta come. So, given that I've traveled halfway around the world, I've delivered the T-shirt, is there anything left to do? Let me share a few words to and with all of you here today. First of all, to the great class of 2018, congratulations, you have truly succeeded. You, the class of 2018, have celebrated your last birthdays as students at Mount SNU, and hopefully have had a chance to sing your last signature karaoke song one last time. And some of you may even be able to do this in the right key. You have played your last late night game of FIFA and the hostels, and watched your last Friday night movie in B315. But here's the important thing, and the guy at Georgia will no longer chastise you when you ask for extra mayo. This is what being a graduate is all about. You can have all the mayo you want as long as you get it for yourself. As president of Johns Hopkins University, I look forward to graduation. That's what we call convocation every year, as a moment to celebrate the successes of our students and the promise of their futures. Convocation is a moment when we certify your entry into the world with the ever so precious gift of higher education. The receipt of a degree means many things. It means that you now have new skills and knowledge. And this in turn means that you'll have a leg up in the job market, whether you're vying for jobs in industry, government, or community organizations. It also means that you'll be able to contribute in more meaningful ways to your community. However, as Sir Tim mentioned a moment ago, you define it. And you will be healthier, you will live longer, and you'll be more prosperous. These are not idle claims. In fact, there is very substantial empirical research to back this up. And most important, your families who are here with you today will share in this amazing bounty. Everything has changed because of the degree that you're receiving today and the journey you've been on for the last 4 years. And of course, I'd ask you to join me in a round of applause for your family members and your parents, because it was they who helped bring you to this moment. So today is very much a family affair. Now, standing here today in this new university, as you and your families are on the cusp of realizing so much possibility, so much promise, I cannot help but reflect on what higher education has meant to me and to my family, and in particular, the quite extraordinary circumstances that enabled my father, and later me, and now my children, to access higher education's many gifts. You see, my family's path to education, higher education, was by no means straightforward. This was because my father's journey from the old world of Europe to the new world of his adopted country, Canada, was anything but assured. As a 7-year-old boy, my father came to Canada with his parents and 2 older siblings. They arrived from Warsaw, Poland in March 1939, just a few months before World War II broke out. Significantly, had they stayed in Europe, as Jews, they would have doubtless perished at the hands of the Nazis' final solution, in which 6 million of their brethren were killed. As was true of so many Jewish families, including my wife's, by the end of the Second World War, the entirety of my father's extensive family in Europe was destroyed. For my father, the motivating force in his life was trying to make sense of the good fortune he had in escaping to Canada, becoming educated, and then having a life that was meaningful and full. Indeed, it was only as his life drew to a close that I began to understand how this awareness, his awareness of having been spared, shaped so much of his life and his commitments to family, to education, and to community. In the hours before my father passed away at the age of 78, he confided to me that when he learned that he had terminal cancer and only a few months to live, his first reaction was, not surprisingly, one of disappointment. He told me for a long time he had hoped that he would make it to 83. I found that a strangely specific number, and in truth, I was a bit bemused. Dad, I asked, what's the magic of 83? Why not a number divisible by 5, like 80? or 85? 83 seems kind of random. My dad replied that 83 was his target because as his older friends got to that age, he started to see their health issues become manifest. Their faculties go, their energies wane, and their illnesses start to multiply. For my dad, it was clear. If he could have just made it to 83, he would go out at the top of his game. But then he paused and he told me that though he wished he had those extra 5 years that would have taken him from 78 to 83, he never lost sight of the 71 years he gained by being able to escape extermination at the age of 7. All told, he told me he had won the lottery of life. Now, this story may seem intensely personal to me and to my family, and it is. In its repetition, I'm reminded always of how my father's need to make sense of his cosmic good fortune in making his way to Canada on the eve of the Holocaust implanted in me and in my siblings an obligation to look beyond ourselves and to seek to make a difference in the lives of the communities of which we are part. But there is another dimension of this story that has profoundly affected me. It has less to do with how my father's near brush with annihilation shaped my life, and more with the callous and inhumane way in which the civilized world responded to the clear and known threats posed to European Jewry. As historian Irving Abella has documented, during the time in which the Nazis governed Germany from 1933 to 1945, the United States only admitted 200,000 Jews. The United Kingdom, 70,000. Argentina, 50,000. Brazil, 27,000. Australia, 15,000. And Canada, surprisingly, fewer than 5,000 refugees, of which my father's family of 5 were, of course, a part. Indeed, when a senior Canadian government official, the Minister of Immigration, was asked in early 1945 how many Jewish refugees Canada would admit from Europe, he famously replied, very succinctly, "None is too many." None is too many. These harrowing words reveal the fact that my native country, like so many others, was not simply misinformed about the plight of Jews, as many would have liked to believe even today. There, in truth, was no ambiguity about what was happening in Europe. Press reports, international conferences, protests in America and elsewhere all had shone a light on the violence, the discrimination, and persecution faced by the Jews of Europe. And of course, there were those brave people around the globe who advocated those fleeing the crisis, among them Indian officials who fought to open the doors of this region, and a Maharaja in Gujarat who himself established a camp to house 1,000 Jewish children from Poland. But the deep-seated fears of foreign and communist influence associated with Jews, anxieties over job competition from people who were other, and the very real struggles of day-to-day life muted the gravity of what was happening and blinded people to the human tragedy, to the genocide that was hidden in plain sight. In doing so, ugly prejudice and gruesome tribalism were openly espoused and allowed to prevail. Now, sadly, this sounds all too familiar. Around the world today, the examples of bigotry's consequences are legion. The rise of nativism in elections across Europe, the increase in vicious activity among hate groups in America, the attacks on religious minorities in your own country, and the sectarian violence that is rending the Middle East. How does this continue to happen? In 1954, social psychologist Muzaffar Sharif devised an experiment to answer this question. It's called the Robbers Cave Study, named for the park in which it took place. In the study, Sharif brought two groups of 12-year-old American boys from similar backgrounds, same level of income, same educational and religious backgrounds, to a secluded summer camp. During the first week, the groups were separated, and the boys in each group developed a strong sense of friendship, camaraderie with one another. In the second week, Sharif arranged for the groups to compete with one another in sports and other activities. Now, while the ethics of bringing unsuspecting boys to a fake camp for a psychological experiment clearly do not hold up to our contemporary research standards, and the meaning of the observed behaviors might be more complex than originally thought, this study's findings are nevertheless unnerving, harrowing. Within a week of their arrival, the boys in each group gave themselves names, the Eagles and the Rattlers, and created their own group identities, complete with flags and T-shirts. When thrown into competition, they began to dislike each other intensely. Name-calling and vandalism escalated to physical aggression. How quickly these boys, so similar in so many different ways, came to cling to their arbitrary and relatively brief identification as a rattler or an eagle, and how easily they were made to turn on one another when forces conspired to push them in that direction. Imagine what would happen when, instead of being pulled from essentially homogeneous groups, groups are now separated and defined on the basis of race, religion, gender, geography. How quickly does the potential for immediate distrust and conflict arise? Sadly, despite the technologies that allow us to transcend space and communicate more easily than ever before, we live in a world where unbridgeable divides that define an us versus a them seem to be growing, cultivated not in controlled studies, not in psychological experiments, but in the real world. And our ability to discern the forces causing these rifts and to counter them is ever more compromised. The mental fences that limit our capacity to see our fellow humans as deserving of recognition, respect, and compassion are erected. Mental fences that block the view and allow people individually and collectively to ignore the truths that might be right in front of them. Here, graduates, is where you come in. After your time spent in the classrooms and labs of this great university, you have gained skills and competencies that cross disciplines and schools of thought. You expanded the breadth and depth of your knowledge. You've learned to live with people who hold different views than you do. Yes, your sports league clubs have competed fiercely against one another, but you have been able to put those affiliations aside to revel together at Breeze Fest. And above all, you have demonstrated your commitment to investing in and helping to build a new and thriving institution, SNU, where there was none before. An institution that reflects the values of its namesake and founder, Shiv Nadar, who has long championed education as a powerful and transformative force for individuals and nations, one that provides opportunity for the many and not just the few. A place that elevates reason, facts, and dispassionate analysis over dogma, falsehood, and suspicion. So, to the graduates of 2018, I'm pinning my hopes on you, that the knowledge you acquired here will allow you to recognize and confront your own biases and to help others do the same. to champion the idea of the equal worth and dignity of all human beings, to create and support institutions that share your values, and to challenge those leaders who do not. My call to you today is to treasure your talents and the institutions you're a part of, and to be clear-eyed about the depth and breadth of human needs and the crises standing right in front of you. Don't assume for a moment that the values and institutions of a liberal democracy, the rule of law, fair and participatory elections, constitutions will prevail without your investment and effort. Nor assume that these institutions are strong enough in their current forms to withstand watershed crises. Be on the lookout for perversions of democracy and new forms of authoritarianism. Be wary of the way that our world can be contaminated by the rhetoric of suspicion and by mean spirit and odious antipathy to those who are deemed other. Be the kind of leaders and institution builders who will identify the mental fences that hold nations back from extending opportunity to people like my own family, who seek only the chance, only the opportunity to build lives of decency and meaning. Be among those who are truly determined to tear down those mental fences. Now, your fellow graduate, Donish, whom I mentioned a few moments ago, captured this idea so eloquently in his application at Johns Hopkins, the role you can play in words that echoes others across time. He said, "I believe we are the privileged few who have won the lottery of birth, and it is our responsibility to create opportunities for others." Donish, that's why we accepted you to Johns Hopkins. In whatever way you heed this call, you will not only vindicate the work of those generations who built the civic, educational, and political institutions that have shaped good liberal democratic nations and allowed us all to thrive, you will, by your words and deeds, help us to imagine and construct even better ones. And of course, never forget what my dad would tell you as he told me. Life is a precious gift. All the years you've already lived and those still to come, make the most of it for yourselves and your families and for the communities of which you are part. Thank you and Godspeed.